Hi, everyone. My name is Jessica Reed. I'm the VP of Strategy and Global Partnerships here at RapidSOS. First, I want to thank everyone for taking some time out of their day to join us here at Ready23. Ready23 is hosted by RapidSOS, and for those of you who are not familiar, RapidSOS is an intelligent safety platform that securely links life-saving data into monitoring centers, 911, and to first responders. Ready23 is an opportunity for all of the key stakeholders involved in the emergency response process to gather, to collaborate, and to discuss how we can continue to push the emergency response industry forward, to continue to innovate, to save even more lives. Everybody, please collaborate, participate. We have a virtual event platform here. We'd love for you all to participate, so please do not hold back. Here with us today, we are joined by a panel of experts. We have Mike Hirsch, who is a Senior Product Manager at SiriusXM Connected Vehicle Services. And we have Eric Janus, who is joining us from Ottawa Police Services. Welcome to you both. Thank you so much for being with us today. I'll pass over to each of you to introduce yourselves and maybe to tell us a little bit about why you're here with us today talking about emergency response. So Mike, let's start with you and we'll then pass over to Eric.
Cool. Thanks, Jess. I do really appreciate the opportunity to be here and speak. I am a Senior Product Manager at SiriusXM Connected Vehicle Services for 25, 26, 27 years now. We've been a contact center for a variety of vehicle manufacturers. So we receive those emergency phone calls, and then when the driver in the vehicle needs emergency support, then we're talking to the PSAPs and ECCs around the world. So for me, it's been, 20 years plus in the automotive industry, working primarily on safety and vehicle communication. And my entire focus at SiriusXM CV is trying to figure out how we can work with the manufacturers, work with the drivers, and work with first responders and safety personnel to make the roads safer.
Thank you much, Mike. And I'm Eric Janus from the Ottawa Police Service. I'm the other end of the process from Mike's end. So I am one of the operations manager for the City of Ottawa Police Service that we answer 911 and dispatch police. So we are located obviously in Canada, in our nation's capital. And like I mentioned before, I am at the other end of the process. So we are the consumers of all the data. And from my perspective, I've been in this way too long that I wish to actually think about at this point. But I've been at the other end. So I've seen the beginning years ago of a simple phone call coming into our various emergency dispatch centers to now migrating to straight data. So we've come a long way over the last few years. And like Mike, I've seen it progress from the beginning to where we are now. So definitely looking forward to today's discussion and seeing how things have changed over the years and what we can do going forward.
Well, thank you both. So today's discussion is going to center on where we're currently seeing innovation in enhancing the emergency response in vehicle collision scenarios. And we're also going to take a little bit of time toward the end to look out into the future and get our panelists' perspectives as to where they see future capabilities of telematics data to enhance emergency response. All right, so let's kick things off. We'll start asking some questions of our panelists and get the conversation going. So Mike, first over to you. You mentioned that you've been in the industry for over 20 years. So we'd love to get your perspective on where you have seen or how you have seen safety evolve, the innovation around safety evolve in the auto industry over this time.
Sure. Well, when I started out, 2001, there was less than a 50% penetration of cell phones. There was maybe a 40-something% chance that somebody had a cell phone in their pocket. So if there was a crash, they were looking, in most cases, they were looking for a phone booth nearby, or maybe somebody they knew to make a call on their behalf. It certainly wasn't always the case that their car could make an emergency call for them. That's obviously been a huge change. Now everybody's got a cell phone, and we've seen cars go from, hey, I was in a crash event and an airbag went off, and tell us location, all the way up to today where we can get detailed statistics about, what kind of crash it was. Did the vehicle roll over? Which airbags went off? How fast were they going when that crash occurred? We can even provide medical information in some cases. And all of that has been a developing process of not only getting that data, but also building the right channel to communicate that data and get that smooth flow, because it's always been a challenge to figure out what the right level of data is. Obviously, you can't really do anything for somebody if you don't know where an emergency event occurred. You need to know what you're looking for. But in a lot of cases, obviously our agents are working with first responders, letting them drive the conversation. So in a lot of cases, what's your emergency? Where's your emergency? What am I looking for? Okay, and now I'm going to go and dispatch, and that may be all the information. Some of it might have been left behind on the table. And as vehicles become more capable, that doesn't always mean that that capability is communicated. And we've had this information for time. And a lot of times first responders don't know we have this information that we could communicate. And so finding a digital way to communicate that, to make that communication faster, to arm first responders with everything that's beneficial without overloading them with extraneous data, I think has always been the challenge. And it's also where I think we've seen a lot of opportunity and growth recently. As Eric mentions, digital data becomes more prevalent. We can communicate that data faster and hopefully in a way that will arm them with the right information to save more lives. So I've seen a great growth just in the time I've been doing this. And, it's really interesting to hear how, what your thoughts are on there, Eric, from the other end.
Yeah, Eric, I'd love to hear from you.
No, for sure. And one of the things we have to keep in mind is, what Mike was saying, that we're now looking at data, or we're looking at more data, we're looking at partnerships. We're no longer a provider and a customer, we're all partners. And really, as we go forward, we have, as a community, both on the public and private side, have to look at ourselves as partners and not as a customer seller relationship, because we're there to serve both our customers at the same level and give them the most they can. Because really, at the end of the day, I'm at the other end. I'm dealing with the people. And for us, we all know that people perceive things very, very differently. And where that's important is any kind of an emergency situation. We've always heard of stories of one situation happening and the 10 people seeing 10 different things that are different. The data is one source of information, and we know it's accurate. So when we do get the information, we can rely on the true amount of details that we get, and the amount of information that we get is so important, because it's important if you're the person involved, because you want to have the proper amount of emergency services going to your accident, for example. If it's minor, you don't want everybody. If it's significant, you do want to get it. So as a person involved, very, very important, but also as a person that's not involved, because keep in mind that if you're not involved in that accident and it's significant, the more information we have, the more information the public can have. So if you just happen to be in the area on your way to work and it's significant and we get that information, public notifications go out. You actually consume that information even though you're not directly involved. And even more important, maybe that ambulance doesn't need to go to this accident because it's minor, and your family member that needs the ambulance gets it now, and it's not delayed because we're sending more resources to a call that doesn't need it. So getting the information is extremely important for everybody involved. And we just have to keep that in mind, that it's not just the emergency services and the person involved, it's everybody around, because we're all interconnected nowadays and anything affects us at different levels depending on what happens. So that's why, although we might say it's only for emergencies, it is, but a big city and even small cities, because we all know if you're in a rural area, there's only 1 or 2 roads leading to a specific area. So it's critical for people to know if something is happening. So it's not a big city discussion, it's an every city discussion.
Right. Well, speaking of cities, both large and small, Mike, we've been in partnership for quite a few years now, and something that I've always admired about you and the SiriusXM team is how you have taken the time to really get out into the field, to experience the technology firsthand, to truly measure the impact that the data is having and to get feedback from the public safety community. Can you talk to us a bit about what you have seen as you've gone out in the field, what type of impact you've seen as we've been running some of these simulations?
Sure. So you've touched on one of the ways we reach out, which is simulation events. It's what we did with Eric's team not too long ago, which was a wonderful opportunity to get up into Canada and see how they do it north of the border, because unfortunately, we do have kind of a U.S. bias being a U.S. company. But yeah, it's absolutely important to us to understand how to communicate, which is one of the keys that we've learned is how best to present the data. We've seen, I think the biggest thing that we've seen is an increase in trust in data. And that is as we transition from a more analog world to a more digital world, when this first data, it's anything new. When this data first starts coming in, okay, trust but verify, is this reliable? Is this something we can, trust? Are we not assigning too many resources to this because, a sensor failed in a vehicle? And I think we've seen a big increase in how much different ECCs and PSAPs around the country have trusted the data and been willing to engage with the data, building a familiarity. We have seen a decrease in dispatch times we've seen up to a minute in some cases, and we're continuing to push on that front. A lot of times policies and procedures still require data, even if it's presented digitally, to be repeated verbally so that it's on the call recording. And we're starting to see that attitude change as more and more places become comfortable with receiving digital data. And so that's something that we've really seen a positive development in, is when you can get that data across faster, you can get help rolling faster. And as Eric mentioned, you can better target what's needed. And that is a fundamental piece of the puzzle.
And that's a good point too, because data is quicker than people, right? Data does not get any busy signals, does not wait in a queue somewhere waiting to be answered. And that was one of the things that we noticed during our testing initially, is that it wasn't a minute, it was 3 and 4 minutes, sometimes even more. So like Mike mentioned, people now are ready to accept data. They're used to accepting data. We do it in our personal lives and in our professional lives. So right now in our testing, we saw that we got the data before we got the phone call. And you know what? If somebody's injured and it's a bad injury, those few seconds or a minute might be the difference between life and death. So of course, different places, like Mike mentioned, has some, policy restrictions, but at the end of the day, it's left to the organization to make that decision and to facilitate. The technology is no longer the barrier. The technology is the enabler. So that is a great position to be in, because the SOP, the policy, we can control. So it's a lot easier, well, in theory, to change policies and procedures than it is technology. But once it's there, you know what? The sky's the limit. So that was really my big takeaway for us, is like, yeah, we still get a phone call, but you know what? We might have been almost on scene already of that accident by the time that we get that call. And you know what? I'd rather, for something that is, because of the type of data we get, it is quite clear that it's not minor. If it is significant, we're able to roll the emergency services right away. And, it might actually save a life just because of the quick response time of the data being received. So it is, I think, going to be a game changer going forward, and something that I think many places are going to appreciate, especially if we look at the RapidSOS portal. For public safety, it's available to us. There's no reason not to do it. For us in Ottawa, we've integrated that into a computer system, so our users can even access the information even quicker and add it to our system. So it's only going to get better as we go forward, and getting that information and doing the exercise that we did is the first step to actually getting to where we want to be.
Fantastic. Thank you, Eric and Mike. Mike, one question that I had for you was around other organizations that might be looking to provide an enhanced safety solution for their end customers. How can they draw inspiration from our partnership? Is there any advice or insights that you'd like to offer companies that are looking to establish similar types of collaborations?
I would say absolutely the first step is to reach out, understand what's needed and how best to present it. I know that just between SiriusXM and RapidSOS, the way we present data has been updated probably close to a dozen times at this point. And that's because we go out and we have the conversations with the different ECCs and PSAPs. How are you using this data? What's the most important? What needs to be at the top of the list? What's the best way to present it to avoid distraction? And a lot of great information comes out of that conversation. I mentioned earlier, 911 operators might not know what questions to ask. Well, at the same time, on the other end, organizations that are trying to improve safety might not know what's needed. One of the conversations I had not too long ago, I was speaking to a fire chief, and he pointed out that a lot of their people in the field are volunteers. And so it's very important to them to understand if there's, say, an accident where a person is trapped inside the vehicle, what's the best way to get into that vehicle? It's always been important, but now with electric vehicles being so strongly on the rise, there can be very bad opportunities to hurt either the driver in the vehicle or the person trying to extract them from the vehicle if they cut through that vehicle in the wrong spot and hit a high voltage or higher amperage line. So that kind of information, that's the kind of information I wouldn't have known to ask for. And so that's why I think it's, if you take nothing else away from that standpoint, go out, talk to the folks who are going to need it, find out what the best case is, because then you can build a better opportunity for both sides, make sure the most important information is there and that we can share it.
Eric, I will pass a similar question over to you, but from the other end, for companies that might be looking to provide a safer solution, greater well-being for their end customers, any advice that you would give them from your perspective?
Well, if I was a company a little bit, looking after, the interest of my customers, is a happy customer is a customer that returns. And at the same time, too, being a consumer, I will go to a company that offers me the best service and the best options that I can. So definitely, we have a lot of companies that exist out there that offer great products, but sometimes don't necessarily communicate it in a sufficient way for the customers to be able to appreciate the level of service that they are getting. So Mike said to reach out, also reach out to your customer base and make sure that they understand the services that you render, because we actually deal with Medical Alert up here in Canada as another pilot project. And the fact that a lot of the customers don't really realize that the information is being made available to public safety and could save, their life or their family's life. So looking at some of these companies, do what, follow Mike's recommendation, but also look toward your customer base and make sure that they're aware of what's happening. And at the same time, too, by doing some stakeholder engagement, you might get that next brilliant idea that your customer base is looking for that you can implement. And it's not always a question of money. Sometimes it's just a matter of figuring, what they want and implementing it.
Excellent. Now we're going to transition a little bit to start talking about the future and what our panelists predict or would like to see. Before we jump into that particular discussion, though, for those of you that are watching, if you do have any questions that you'd like to ask the panelists, now is a great time to put those questions in the chat. We will have a little bit of time at the end of this session to go through them. So please don't hesitate. Any and all are welcome. Okay, guys, the future. Would love to get a sense from each of you. We'll start with you, Eric. What do you expect to see in the future? What do you predict around safety, automotive, and importantly, what would you like to see?
So for me, I always think of these questions as not what I want to see or hope to see, it's what's coming that I don't know is coming. If you would have told me just a few years ago that I'd be able to have a watch on my wrist and be able to communicate to people across the world on it, I wouldn't have believed you. So a lot of it is we have a good idea as to what's coming, but I can't wait to be surprised to see what is the next thing that's coming. For us up here in Canada, we're making a transition at the national level with next generation 911, and that will open up the floodgates in Canada for all the data. Anything that has to do with telemetrics, to medical information, and name it and everything, the pathways, the highways being built for that information. what the different vendors and organizations are going to put on that highway, I can't wait to see what it is, because I'm sure I'm going to be surprised by the imagination of the companies and the people out there as to what they can provide all of us as we go forward. So, you know what I want to see? I want to see what I don't know is coming. That's the answer. So I'm kind of jealous of my kids sometimes, because the stuff they're going to see is probably going to be amazing. But I'm hoping to see at least the beginning of some of this as we transition into the true data side of the house, and when we look at emergency response and services.
Thanks. Mike, what's your take?
That's a really tough answer to follow, because
Right.
it's a great take. Thanks, Eric. Looking just a little bit nearer term, you know, we're seeing bandwidth costs trending downward. You know, we're seeing more and more sensors in vehicles. We're seeing more and more capability in terms of recognizing types of accidents. So in my opinion, what we're going to see in the near term is more capability to really get a full picture of what happened at the scene before first responders are ever on site, hopefully before they're ever making the decisions on what needs to roll. And, you know, we're working with car companies to try and get things like pictures of the scenes, you know, engaging those cameras that are on site, a very detailed knowledge of who's in that vehicle when an emergency occurs, so that, you know, you can get tailored care. Eric touched on medical alert earlier, but as medical data becomes more available, whether it's through, you know, cell phones, watches, whatever, then we can actually tailor the care to whoever's in the vehicle if we can establish who's in that vehicle at the time of the accident. And then some of the more mundane stuff, just in the near term, things like, oh, this is an electric vehicle. Okay, need to make sure that the fire team that's rolling is set up for an electric vehicle and not, you know, a gasoline vehicle, because, you know, you're going to use a different chemical mix. You're going to approach that differently. Things like charging or discharging. So is it a leak? Is it actually, you know, could there be a fault in the battery pack? Do we need to worry about shorts in the scene? I think that kind of information is something that's going to become more and more available in the short term. And I really look forward to working with first responders, because that's a huge volume of data. And so making sure it's the targeted information and not just flooding that data in and overwhelming and maybe losing key data in just the volume of data available, I think is going to be a very important conversation. But I am with Eric in that I really want to see what comes next too.
And really, I think our biggest challenge that we're going to have, like Mike is mentioning, is going forward is how to sift through all this data coming in, because we're going to go from one end of the spectrum of not having enough information to having too much information. Mm-hmm. That's a good problem to have. And at least then we can address it, and then it becomes a challenge to figure out how we can consume it and get it to the proper people. So I think going forward, Jess, it's going to be very interesting to see how everybody works together to see where we're actually going as a team.
That ties back into your earlier question too, Jess, what Eric was just saying, in that it's going to be very important as companies collaborate, as we work together to provide that data. I think it becomes more important than ever to become that end-to-end solution with all the different moving parts, because winnowing out, okay, we need to know X, we need to know Y, we need to know Z. This is the key data, and how to present it so that it's most usable. I think that's going to be absolutely vital.
100%. Eric, we've got a question. I think this one is definitely best for you. The question is, you touched on SOPs before. How have you gone about incorporating the data that's being received from SiriusXM, for example, into your standard operating procedures? You know, and what words of advice do you have for others on that?
So for us, we were lucky because we did a progressive transition into RapidSOS, and the way I presented it to my people was a supplemental level of information. It was there that could be used if required and needed, and the impact on the SOPs was fairly minimal because we maintained our own procedures, just had access to more information. As we progress deeper or further into the various processes that we had, especially with the integration to our CAD system, so what we used to take calls, then it just became an addition. So not that complicated. Essentially, then it became a formal additional source of information that we factored into our information collection. So it was essentially an addition in the call taking process that we just add that component added to it. And because of the flexibility and the simplicity of RapidSOS, the technology part, because we all know when we implement technology, the IT world is always a little bit of a challenge when it comes to it. It was so simple that that was not a barrier. So we were able to focus on the processes of call taking and dispatching, and not on the challenges of plugging VMs together or widgets or switches or worrying about anything else. So it was very much seen as essentially you have another source of data, and how do you consume that information within your current SOP. So although it might appear somewhat challenging and frightening at the beginning, once you really consider that it's just another complainant calling you in a different way with more details, and it's automated, actually it becomes quicker and easier to be able to consume that information.
Excellent. And another one that's for you, and Mike, if you have any thoughts on this one too, please share.
Sure.
Question is there any other data around telematics that you, Eric, your team would find particularly valuable?
So for us, when we talk about telematics, we talk about vehicles. So just to, to give a little bit of a push on Mike's side of the house, I'd love for every vehicles out there to have SiriusXM, so we could have it everywhere, right? For me, what SiriusXM is giving me is amazing. Like, for those that have not seen this, definitely do your research. I was in awe with the level of information that we had. What I want it more. So I want more customers out there to have it. So that's really, what I'm looking at. I just want more of what I have right now, because I dream of a world and a day that information will be standard and received from everybody. Not sure, Mike, if you have more to add on that one, though.
We're doing our best to bring it live.
I was going to ask, Mike, did you plant that question?
No, I didn't actually do that. I had nothing, I swear.
Well, but for me, I'm selfish. I just want more. Is like, when I saw it the first time, I couldn't believe, like, seriously, I never would have thought that what we were getting is what we were actually going to get. When you look at, speed, occupants, like, it's pretty mind-boggling what you get. Coming from a world that we're trying to lock down the location and the type of vehicle for the incident, right? That's where the bar is a lot of times. Where are they? What kind of vehicles do they have? Because you need to locate them. So now you're giving me, there's really nothing, really. I'm just trying to think, again, look at Mike. Yeah, if they had, video and I could have access to that, maybe not initially, because I don't want my dispatchers and call takers to have access to that and be traumatized because what they might see. But really, what I need, to Mike's point, with the electrical vehicles coming forward, like 5 years ago, I wouldn't even been on my radar. So now it's like, okay, what else? Are we looking at hydrogen vehicles next time? Or in the future, if that's the case, well, yeah, it's as technology changes and these different types of vehicles get on the road, yeah, because hydrogen, we all know it's going to be a different world altogether. So definitely, as things change, what I want the technology to continue consuming the information that some of this new tech is providing.
Excellent. Well, thank you both so much for joining us, for sharing your insights. Mike, Eric, we're so grateful to have you both as part of the RapidSOS Ready community. For those of you who have logged in, hope you have enjoyed the panel. If any of you have any additional questions or would like to connect, please don't hesitate to reach out to me via email at jreed@rapidsos.com or via LinkedIn. We have a lot more engaging sessions lined up for today as well as tomorrow, so please be sure to explore them. You can explore them on the Wova platform. And again, thank you to everyone for being a part of today's event.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.